Namaste and welcome to this episode of the 10 p.m. live in Jaipur Dialogues. And today, from all the hubbub of Indian shores, we are taking you away on a flight to USA. And there we got Sree Iyer joining you. Hello, Sree. How are you?
Namaskar, and it's a pleasure to be on your channel, Sanjay ji.
And let me introduce Sree to you. He is a techie and who left Lucky and who left tech and is now full time into media. If you've heard of P Gurus, that is his initiative. P Gurus 1 is the P Guru handle on Twitter, and Sree Iyer 1 is the handle, is Sree Iyer's personal handle on Twitter. Why this one, Sree?
Because I could not get it without that. Somebody already had Sree Iyer. I'm a bit of a late entrant to Twitter. I came, I think, in 2012. So I had to settle for a 1. So that sort of set the tone. And P Gurus also, I said, well, when there is a 1 here, let's be consistent. So P Gurus 1 in Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, everywhere you'll see the P Gurus 1.
Okay, I thought it was an assertion of being the top dog.
There is no 2. There is no 2, only 1.
There's only 1. Okay, great. So, Sree, you have a very, very close seat on the US elections. And not only in US elections, also Congress elections and other elections, you follow them very closely. And I thought that you would be the best person to discuss not just the US elections, how US elections are panning up, and also what their impact would be on US-India relations, given the deep entrenched establishment. Whether, in fact, that question I'll be asking you later on, whether change of president actually matters in the US at all, the US and what is called the long-term policies. So let me start with this Trump elections of 2016. You know, in 2014, I happened to be in the US, and that time the elections to the House of Commons and Senate were going on. And what happened was that I think for the first time in about 70 years, or 60 years maybe, in about 60 years, there was a complete Republican control over the House and
the Senate.
The House and the Senate, the House and the Senate both. And from that point onwards, I could make out that Democrats were going to have a very tough time in the next elections. However, when Trump got the nomination, and almost every psephology firm kind of voted him out. And I think at the time of going in for elections, Trump was trailing by about 5% on average. And I remember there was only one company that was giving him 0.1% advantage out of, I think, about 20 major ones that were polling. So all the poll agencies were practically unanimous that Trump was going to lose. And he did end up about 2.5% in the negative as far as the popular vote was concerned. Yet, he managed to win, and he managed to win fairly comfortably. I think there was a gap of about 70 electoral votes. And this year again, he's again trailing by an average of about 8.2% as we talk. So how do we look at this polling business? Whether this is going the same way as it was going in 2016, or is it a bit different this time?
I think it is a little bit different this time. In my personal opinion, it is perhaps going to be harder for Trump to get re-elected. And it's just a simple reason, it's bad luck. Because Corona, the way it has hit the United States, it's most unfortunate timing of that. And for the first few weeks, if the United States had gone about it in a slightly different way, perhaps there could have been more control. And the other mistake that they did was perhaps also they opened up too quickly, including the state of California. And so what happened was you needed to have containment initially, very, very serious containment. In that, I applaud Prime Minister Modi, because you kind of choked off the economy. But what is the, what do you give up for what? And I think he chose wisely that lives of people matter more than livelihood. And I think that is being proven right now, because India has had a lower incidence of COVID and on a per capita basis than the United States. And United States, it is still in the grip of this. And what happened is there was a first round of about $750 billion of money that was spent to give it in the hands of businesses, individuals, and so on. So what has happened is that started sometime in June, July, August, 3 months. People had some money in their hands. So it looked as if things are going fine, that there is no issues. However, the Congress and Senate could not agree upon the second tranche of the same thing. They wanted to give another set of the same thing, and they're locked in a battle. And last week the Congress went for a recess, which means now they are not meeting even, and we don't know what it's going to be, when it's going to be. So people say that because the Congress, the House, is democratic control, they are deliberately sticking it to Trump so that people will feel the pain at the time of going to the ballot, and therefore that will give them an edge. However, this, in my opinion, is a scorched earth policy. Sanjay, I am politically an independent. I do not ascribe to either Democrats or Republicans. I see it as I say it. I say it as I see it. I'm sorry. And what I see today is a bit of an unfortunate timing for Trump. And the pain, the US unemployment is now down to 11 to 12%. It went up to 20%, by the way. It is coming back. So today, if I can have to describe to you life on the street in the United States, restaurants are open, but you cannot dine there. You have to go and do takeouts. And hair salons just opened last week in California. This is a local thing. Each county decides when they want to open it, and therefore it kind of goes back and forth. I actually had to go 2 months ago to a different place to get my haircut done, because there they had a restricted way to allow haircuts to happen. So there is a little bit of, I'll see it, and
you don't have much hair to cut, actually.
You see, I'm heading towards perfect hairhood.
Okay.
You know what that is? God created a few perfect heads, and on the rest, he put hair.
Good
This
luck to
applies
you.
only to men. So there was a long term.
Otherwise, it could be construed as racist.
Yes. and
Gender bias.
there was a long running serial, just like mega serial that you have in India, called The Bold and the Beautiful. And we all were thinking,
I remember
when will the sequel come, Bald and the Beautiful? So we are still waiting for that.
Okay, please carry on.
So this is one headwind that he has run into. Now, there are also more and more allegations coming. See, there is a split inside the Republican Party today. And this is now coming up to the surface. Now, there is a real chance that the Republicans may not only lose the presidency, they may also lose the Senate. 10 races are very tight in November. Out of those 10, 8 are Republican and only 2 are Democrat. So let's assume that it goes the same way. The 8 Republicans lose and 2 Democrats lose. Then the Democrats gain 6. And that would give them a majority in Senate also. It will not be 2/3 majority. It will be a simple majority. But with House Democrat control, President Democrat control, Senate Democrat control, they are going to do a lot of reforms. I don't know what are the things that they would do, but I can tell you 2 things that I think more or less Democrats are kind of agreed upon. One is to try and give free school education up to undergraduate level. Today, even school, government-run universities like the UC system, that's the biggest government-run system, is you still have to pay for it. It costs around, for people who live in United States, in California, you have to be in-state. You pay around $30,000 a year, including tuition and stay and all that stuff. Now, if you're not in the state of California, but you're outside, you have to pay almost double of that or more, a little bit more than that. So it's a pretty expensive proposition. However, it's a very popular place. UC system is considered as good as the Stanford and other Ivy League schools, where the prices are much higher. So it's what's in your budget that people work towards. So long story short, what the Democrats might try to do is to make undergrad education in public colleges free. That would be a huge step, because many students start out in debt as soon as they graduate. So they don't have time to look up and see, when do I settle down, when do I buy a house, when do I grow a family and all that, because they're already starting to pay their college tuition fees. Some parents, I would say South Asian, Asian mindset, Asian American parents, they sort of set the college fund aside, and it helps. In the case of, I'm not saying the Americans don't, it does happen in many places, but sometimes you just cannot do it, because 1 in 2 marriages in America fail. So what happens is children grow out of wedlock. So you don't have the support structure where somebody is, providing a stable household. So what happens is, you're kind of struggling from the day one. So that is the challenge that US has. And this would be the demographic that would vote for the Democrats. Therefore, I expect that Biden would announce something like that. The second thing that I expect them to do is to try and bring what I call it as universal basic income, something similar to Manrega in India, meaning like every person, regardless of whether he's at work or not, might be getting a check every month. Subsistence thing could be $500 a month, could be $1,000 a month. There was one candidate who had said that, Andrew Wang, said that it should be $1,000 a month. And that might be a little bit high, but it might start at $500 a month. So that could be another a good thing to have. The reason I'm saying that this will, of course, make United States the biggest socialist system in the world.
Yes,
I have news for you.
That's
Sanjay, I have news for you. It already is the biggest socialist system in the world. And I'll explain to you why.
And now it's going to turn full socialist, you mean?
Full socialist, yes. The only difference between, say, Sweden and United States is the taxation would still be less. So then they will have to figure out where to go find the additional dollars. Now, there are lots of loopholes that have been created by the 1% of the country who have probably 20% of country's wealth. Now, Biden will start taxing them, and that might put a bit of breaks in the way these investments go. But America, remember, in a post-COVID scenario, it's going to look to manufacture its own stuff. A lot of the stuff that was being made in China is probably going to find its way back to America. I would say there are two things. One is household goods like shirts, pants, and all that. That might still happen in Bangladesh, Vietnam, and India, and so on. But the medium technical value, that sort of stuff will probably stay in the United States, or will come back to United States. A lot of that stuff, you wouldn't believe the Midwest, which is the area around Chicago. Although if you draw a line from Chicago down south to New Orleans, that area, there were companies that would take a picture of what it was in their assembly plant here, bring it down brick by brick, bolt it, take everything, disassemble it, take the whole thing, put it on a ship, take it to China, and then reconstruct it back in a piece of land in exact same shape and form as it used to exist in the United States, so that they could start manufacturing. So this kind of stuff happened a lot. And I would see some of that come back to the United States. The United States is now more and more tuned to the online way of working, in the sense that people are used to working from home all the time, and that's going to go up even more. And when online stuff goes up, then you're going to see people go away from the cities also, because you don't need to have that hustle and bustle anymore. You don't have to be at work. Once a month, if you have to show up for work in physical presence, that's okay. So there's some big big changes coming down the road for Americans. So these are the things that I expect Democrats to do. And if the Republicans come back to power, I think they'll hold China's feet to the fire a little bit more than perhaps the Democrats will.
So in this United States of Socialist America, the USSA, what would you think the leading issues would be? Of course, in every American election, economy is always the number one. And that's what the mistake that people, these apologists in India do, that they try and put economy on a high pedestal, which it never is. In fact, I have never seen economy matter in any election whatsoever. There have always been other matters. The Indian public is, I think, too close to nirvana to really bother about economy. And really, I've seen this in Bihar. But I went as an observer in a Bihar election, and after being there for about 15 days, I made this observation, and I wrote it to a few people. Of course, there was no Twitter at that time. Otherwise, I would have tweeted also that I can now understand why Buddha and Mahavir attained nirvana in this area. So the economy, of course, will always be number one. But beyond that, how important is the China issue? I know that Trump is trying to take it to the top, and the Democrats are trying to play it down. But I can also see these Democrats, they are goofing up quite a lot. As far as the issues are concerned, Trump seems to be far more focused than the Democrats are. I mean, they are flailing all over the place. What's your opinion?
You're right. Democrats also, they have the progressive Democrats and they have the more conservative Democrats. First thing that viewers need to understand is there are four parties in the United States, not two. You have the Republicans, then you have the Democratic Republicans, then you have the Democratic Democrats, and then you have the Republican Democrats. So it's these two middle things. They are the ones who come together to run the country. But the extremes are the ones that bring them into power. So there is this. So you get all these extreme right, extreme left things flare up around election time. In my opinion, BLM is one such manifestation for the Democrats. And on the Republican side, it will be usually like building the wall or abortion. That was a big deal for a long time. But in this particular election, people are going to find it hard, in my opinion, from September to November and December. That's when they are going to really feel the pain, because what will happen is that it's like a cartoon. If you see the Bugs Bunny cartoon, the guy is running and then he runs off the cliff and he's still going the same altitude for some time and then he drops. In my opinion, the US economy is in that situation. And then when that drop happens, and then you will see really a big adjustment. The stock market is acting as if there's nothing wrong, that everything is going to be okay. If the vaccine comes tomorrow, everything is going to be fine. I'm not so sure about that. This particular virus seems to have morphed itself into more than one form. So vaccines, I don't know how much efficiency they're going to have. I also saw the dangerousness of this. Many people that I know who passed on, they were fine within 72 hours, checked out. So it's when it hits so fast that it doesn't matter what kind of care you give, they just can't seem to be able to fight it off. So that fear is there, and I think you will start seeing very traditional businesses hurting. Airline travel, cinemas, going and eating in restaurants. You can take out, but there is a certain ambiance with the restaurant, right? If you take out, you still have to go clean up your cutlery afterwards. You can't just wipe your hands off and then go walk around or do something like that. And then going and buying stuff in stores. That used to be a huge part of American economy. American economy is consumer spending based, 60-70%, and that is going to take a huge hit. There are things that you can buy looking at their picture on Amazon or other e-commerce sites, but some things you have to feel it. You cannot buy, for example, groceries, right? I mean, I know what to look for when I'm buying bhendi in the market. I know what to look for when I'm buying a pineapple. What should be the greenness of a mango? You don't buy it for today, eating it today. You want to buy it for 3-4 days. So there is a certain amount of art involved in it. So all these things, those are also starting to take a big hit. Today, if I want to buy something in an electronic store, for example, what they ask you to do is they ask you to place the order, and then you go to the opening of the store, and then there they'll ask you to show a printout of the order, and they'll go and get it from inside. So in other words, you don't get to feel it. For example, if there's an exercise machine that you want to use, those are the kind of things that you really want to use it before you buy. That thing is a Hulk, $500, $1,000. You bring it, assemble it, takes hours to assemble. And if you don't feel it very comfortable for your body, it's a big hassle. So TV, for example, things like that, where they are. So these are all things that are going to start making a big difference. And the pain will be when they are about to vote. And the other thing is, now people are saying that you can vote by mail. And Trump did something that was not a very nice thing, in my opinion. He withdrew funding from the US Postal Service around the time it was getting ready to start mailing out these ballots. Ballots are supposed to reach us a month ahead of election. So October 4th, you would expect everybody to have their ballots, because you take the California ballot, for example. I don't know what is the size of ballot you've seen. In EVMs, it's just a small tablet you go and pick. California ballot is 6 feet long. 6 feet long.
6
Yes,
feet long.
6 feet long. And the reason it is that long is because when we vote, we not only vote for the president and vice president and our congressmen and sometimes senators. Senators are six years, and that's not exactly on the same year as the presidential election. But we also vote on a lot of local issues that are only located to particular county that you live in. County is the equivalent of a district. You also sometimes vote on statewide issues. So all these things are all put there. So you need to really do a lot of research to find out where you stand, whether you want to fund this, whether you want to fund that, and so on and so forth. Lots of stuff goes into it. It's like a sitting down for an examination paper. I and my wife and our kids, everybody sits down at a dining table. We mull over all these things and we talk about it. Each one, expresses their opinion. So long story short, it's a big process. So what Trump tried to do was to try and withdraw funding for the US Postal Service so they could not deliver mail in time. And the Congress stepped in to try and undo that. So there is a bit of a fisticuff going on, executive order versus the Congress. See, in the United States, the rulemaking, the budgeting, everything is with Congress. All the Senate can do is they can say, no, you cannot do this. And if Senate does not pass the Congress's bill verbatim, then you have to sit down together and reconcile it. So likewise, if Senate starts something and the Congress passes a slightly different version, they have to sit down together and come up with something that is acceptable to both sides, and then that gets presented to the president, who signs it. Now, in this case of US Postal Service, Trump just issued an executive order. Now, the executive order privilege is there. However, in many cases, it has to be ratified back. It is like passing an ordinance, for example, in India. You pass an ordinance, but the ordinance has to be ratified. So in this case, because there was not enough time, there was a temporary time when postage was getting delivered late. Many people today get their Amazon groceries also on post. So it was a bit of a problem. I believe that has been sorted out. However, there is a funny system, like you mentioned at the beginning of your intro, that even though Hillary polled 2 million votes more than Trump ended up getting elected as president. It has to do with the way US sends its delegates. There's a delegate count for each state. So you have to sort of win where it matters more. And that is where Trump prevailed over Hillary. And in my opinion, it was Hillary's election to lose. And unfortunately for her, she fell sick 2-3 weeks before the election. So people had genuine concern. Is she healthy enough? And also there was this email server controversy, which I thought was blown way out of proportion. And this is one thing that I've seen Democrats do. There was a PT board controversy for John Kelly. John Kelly, whatever, Kelly. And the same thing again with Hillary Clinton. Simple issues that they can easily swat it away. They don't do it, and it just blows up.
But even Biden is not very healthy.
Well, there is a video doing the rounds where he's on a program and the host asks a question and this man is sitting and sleeping. It doesn't augur well. But
I recall that I think the elections is on 7th November. It's about 68 days away
right.
as we talk. And around this time, in 2016, also, Trump was trailing by about 7% votes in popular vote. And it's something similar this time as well. And in India, we've seen that COVID has not affected Mr. Modi's popularity one bit. In fact, it's gone up significantly from about 71% to about 83%. That's unimaginable in any Western country. But that's the sort of situation that has happened here. So, as you said, okay, COVID was mishandled and they should have done a few things better. But if COVID curve flattens significantly over the next 60 days or so, you think people will still hold it against Trump? And Trump does have, that kind of a drive where he does impossible things and pulls out impossible victories. He has done it in the past. And of course, 2016 was the best example. And Democrats, as you just say, has just said that they have been known to blow it. So let's discuss that possibility as well.
So watch out for the next couple of weeks if any vaccines get officially approved. And if that happens, then what happens is that is like 6 weeks before the election time. That gives enough time for Trump to try and take credit for Corona. And that has to be effective, by the way. I mean, it has to be like people are suddenly seeing a very noticeable fall in the new cases of Corona. If that happens, then but it has to happen in the next 2 weeks, because once the ballots are mailed out to people, citizens, then you can't control when they are going to vote. It is not election day. Remember, it is not November 7th that people are going to vote. There is no polling booth this time. This time, all you do is it's like handling mail. You get the ballot in mail and you have up to a month to send it back in. So events that might be closer to the election date might not impact the election result. That's why I'm saying in the next couple of weeks, he needs that big home run, what I call as a six in cricket. He needs that big event where he can, 2 weeks time, I think is good enough to say, okay, this vaccine has been tested on so many people across the country. It is showing an excellent success rate and so on. And then that would turn the thing tide in his favor. I'm sorry. Let's go continue with your question. Next one, maybe I can answer a little bit more on something else.
Yes, I was also asking about other issues. China, of course, is one. I would like you to dilate on it a little bit more, and also this peace initiative that has been worked out between Israel and the UAE, setting off a completely new narrative in the Middle East. And that also is being attributed to Trump. And foreign policy also plays a very important role in the American elections, unlike the Indian elections. How far do you think that this is going to impact? Because people are fearing that closer to the election, maybe in the next 2 weeks or so, America might do something with China, really take some punitive measures. Maybe do a bombing run or something of that kind. It's not impossible for Trump, we know. And I think what happened yesterday and day before in Pangong So must have come as a shot in Trump's arm as well. Because the Chinese were really pegged back and pushed back. They haven't experienced this kind of a thing since 1967. And what I could hear from, I think there were a lot of cheers went up in the USA. So these two issues I would like you to discuss in a little more depth.
Sure, sure. First, let's go look at China. Viewers, there is a subtle relationship between how US does business with China than, say, US with India or any Western country. And the subtleness is Hong Kong. In other words, the United States pays for or buys the goods from China using the Hong Kong dollar. Now, in Hong Kong, the dollar, there is a yearly renewable agreement that happens between the United States and Hong Kong. This was started in 1993, 4 years before Hong Kong reverted back to China, wherein the United States said that as long as the Hong Kong dollar is pegged to the US dollar and it stays between 7.75 to 7.85 Hong Kong dollars to a US dollar, the US would treat it as a convertible currency, and thereby all the investments that happened, this is 93, and now we are in 27 years later, all the investment that would happen would flow into mainland China through Hong Kong. Now, Chinese have had their currency called the RMB. They pegged it to around 6, and now it is close to 7, just a little bit of dilution over the last 30 years. But nobody wants to buy or take renminbis. Even today, 95% of commerce trade happens in non-RMB currency into and out of China. So China has this huge credibility problem with its currency. So it really needs the Hong Kong to be the stability where they still do a lot of what I would call as opaque transactions between the Hong Kong dollar and the RMB. As long as US doesn't get affected, US said it's okay, you do whatever you want, but we will not, promote your currency outside. So RMB is the weak spot there. And I think China tried to make it impossible for Hong Kong to have its own monetary system. The first step of that was to pass this new national security law, wherein any dissenter could be tried and hanged for treason. And I think that set off another set of dominoes. So China realized that the world is grappling with COVID. So they can do some drastic moves. Even aggression against India, for example, can be looked at as one of those things. For example, nobody can explain why China controlled the virus so well that it was only limited to Wuhan and a few other cities. And anybody else who was living in Wuhan affected by this were not allowed to go back to their place of living inside China. So they completely sealed off Wuhan. But whoever was living in Wuhan, who was a foreign national, they allowed them to all leave. And that is how you have the world catching corona. If they had said, okay, there is a problem, we will also contain them, we will get them out of it and then let them leave. If they had done that, that would have been a much more responsible step on part of China. They did not do that. So first off, is it a lab-created virus or not? We don't know. Second off, could China have done better? Yes, they could have done better. So all these questions are going to be weighed in. But for the West and the US to start punishing China, they need to first be able to stand up and walk. And that is where the vaccine makes a big, big difference. Once a vaccine is proven to be solid, then you will start seeing US really, really go aggressively against China. They might drive them out of the South China Sea, where they have all these islands that they have created. That will be the first step, in my opinion. They'll just, forcibly push them out of there. And those lands are claimed by other countries. There are, in fact, a world Hague court has decreed some for it.
Yes. There's an arbitration award under the United Nations Convention on the Laws of the Sea, UN clause, in favor of the Philippines. That has not been enforced because Philippines doesn't have the means to enforce it, and China completely disregards it, even though China and Philippines are both signatories and the US is not.
Yes.
This is the interesting part. Okay. So
China,
Yes.
So China,
of course, about China.
Go ahead.
As far as China is concerned, we cannot even believe their numbers and what they have put out on the disease, on the virus. Whether they had only those numbers or they had 10 times that or they had 100 times that, nobody would know. And we've already seen leaks coming out which are describing 100 times the number. Anyway, so that's all, because of that system, that totalitarian system, it's all shrouded in secrecy. Now let's come to the United States' own problems. The BLM, the Antifa, and let's recall 2016. I think in 2016 also, there was a late push from the whites, and I remember all the polling agencies were giving a majority of white women vote to the Democrats. It turned out to be the other way around. You think that this kind of mayhem in which Democrat hand is largely seen, not just suspected, it is clearly seen. And, some of the very inappropriate and unwise remarks by somebody like Kamala Harris have only added fuel to the fire. So this kind of unwise pandering to what is actually a fascist movement, according to me. Other people may have other views about them. This kind of pandering, in my opinion, would alienate even their own dedicated constituencies like the Hispanics. I mean, Hispanics are not really very fond of such total chaos and total breakdown of law and order, because I think they're mostly the working class and they do get affected. And already there is COVID, and then comes this Antifa, and even the black business class, that is also getting affected. So don't you think that there is likely to be a silent majority reaction as there was in 2016, and that could put paid to Biden's plan, who is otherwise also seen as, a bit iffy?
You raised some very valid points, Sanjay. And let me start with Kamala. She's a real fighter. She's not going to just like that give up. Unfortunately for her, she has this identity problem in the sense, is she a Jesuit or is she of Indian extraction? Unfortunately for her, there are not enough Indian votes to get her that validity. So she kind of tends to risk that and say, okay, it's pure numbers game. And I'll share those things with our viewers. There are 4 million Indian Americans in the US, but only 1 million or 1.5 million can vote. Many of the Indian Americans are stuck in this visa process. They are either green card holders or they are not even green card holders. Because today, for Indian Americans, it takes up to 15 years, 1-5, to get a visa, to get a green card. So 4 million, but only 1 million matter. Whereas if you look at the other side, which is I pit a lot of people that came in under UNHRC, under Obama's regime, about 4 million Muslims, almost all of them are citizens. Somalian extraction, Syrian extraction, all sorts of places. They have come from all over. And they tend to vote as a bank. For some amazing reason, they all seem to think that this is how they should vote. They don't seem to want to apply their minds. So it's very, very unfortunate because a lot of them are educated too. So what Kamala Harris is going to do is...
I have an explanation.
Go ahead.
Yeah, in the Islamic jurisprudence, use of aql or reason is banned by the lay public. Is banned for the lay public.
So
it is. I'm not joking.
So if you are a politician and you have a guaranteed vote bank of 4, and the other vote bank is 1 million, and that's also, each one thinks they know exactly what is wrong with the country, and not everybody is going to vote one way. So there is a certain amount of stepmotherly treatment, if you will. What the Indian Americans need to do is they need to understand that to be counted, they need to all speak with one voice. And it is changing. It is happening now. There are initiatives that are going on now where people are saying, you take this stand, we are not going to vote for you. And it may make a difference in critical states. Remember, you don't need to be an absolute majority all over the state, all over the country. You can be in pockets where it matters. Florida, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Ohio, So there are like 7 or 8 critical states that could go either way. And that is where the Indians can make a huge difference, because the margin of victory is going to be in hundreds sometimes of votes, or even low thousands. There they can make a difference. They need to use and choose wisely. I'm not holding a brief for Trump. I'm not holding a brief for Biden either. Each, in my opinion, both are flawed. And also sometimes people say, oh, Trump is beholden to Russia and Biden is beholden to China. I can tell you some facts. Mitch McConnell's wife, Elaine Chao, is from mainland China. Her sister is on the Bank of China board. And Biden's son is on one of the biggest mutual funds of China. So it kind of evens itself out. So China has both people have deep inroads into, they made deep inroads into both the parties. So that's probably going to be not much of a factor. The people will have to tell that if we have to send a strong message to China, let's assume that that is on the top of the list for people. In that case, I think people will lean Republican, because they have seen that Trump has actually taken on China. I'll give you a contrast for this. Obama could have stopped Russia from occupying Crimea, and he did not. So this is where I see as a contrast, where the Democrats are not seen as being that effective in foreign policy as the Republicans are. So that could be a factor. But if the American public start feeling their pockets being pinched in the next couple of weeks, like 4 weeks or so, that could go against Trump. So these are the main challenges.
Okay. That's a pretty nice analysis. Of course, I always felt that Democrats were always quite namby-pamby, and the establishment seems to have swung India's way. And the establishment, as you say, the Republican Democrats and the Democrat Republicans, that, according to you, is the establishment. And they run America, as you said. So this particular segment seems to have moved over to India in a significant manner, as I can observe, over the last year or last year and a half, and especially since the problems with China began. And the first measure, or the first significant measure, the symbolism, though it was renaming their Pacific Command as the Indo-Pacific Command. I thought it was a very important symbolism, because it did not come from the president, it came from the establishment. So that's why I thought it was very significant. So how important is the establishment's role in this election?
The establishment is a big factor. If you look at some of the Republicans who worked in the Trump administration, they are now quietly moving away from what there used to be like a blind support towards Trump. They are now saying, let's use some caution. So these are all, little statements that are given here and there. But it has to, if you look at it in the entirety, the deep state is not very comfortable with the executive style of Trump. What Trump did was, if you can imagine a building contractor being given to run the country, right? A building contractor goes and he's building a multi-storied building. Okay, one Mestri will come one day, another guy will not come. This guy may say, I want you to do this first, and the other guy will say, the Mestri says, no, I don't want to build that, I will do this. So Trump has a hire and fire policy. So what has happened is a lot of chopping and changing. This is perhaps the one White House that so many people came in. It was like a revolving door. Somebody comes in, somebody goes out, somebody comes in, somebody goes out. So what Trump did was, there was a point at which he had 4 or 5 ex-generals running the country. I mean, this is a democracy, and then they were the defense secretary, secretary of state, and a few other positions. So there's a real fear that anytime he has problems, he tends to go that way and tries to bring the generals, and he thinks perhaps they'll take the orders as they are given and so on. So long story short, the deep state has moved towards India because I think India has proved to be a reliable partner in many things. India always plays by the global rules. Don't look at the anti-CAA resolution being passed by Democrats. It's a pure money game, because I am told reliably that $156 million was earmarked for 52 city councils to pass this resolution, because they felt, one particular individual who did this felt that by doing this, since Trump is seen close to India, by doing this, people will see that, uh, sticking it to Trump. That is how the Democrats were seeing. All the city councils are Democrat run. So so in order to attack Trump, they are attacking India. So that just shows you that they have really India has identified with the West, especially with the Americans, saying that we are a responsible nation. India's military is very highly regarded. India's intelligence is very highly regarded. And so there is a lot of stuff that is to like about India. Yes, there are India used to be in external affairs, in my opinion, a little bit meek. They would be more reactive, not proactive. For example, they agreed with China that, Tibet is part of China, blah, blah, blah. 2-3 agreements have been done. But every time China pokes its nose into India's affairs by criticizing 370 or anything in Pak-occupied Kashmir, India should have gone and whipped them back on the same thing. They never used Dalai Lama. It could be much more effective by trying to use him to say, okay, he has a government in exile here. And in fact, US House has a letter now that is doing the rounds. And if it gets ever voted on, you're going to see that US Congress is going to ask that the autonomous region of Tibet be declared as a separate country. This should be coming from India. This should be coming from India, not from the United States. This is where India is.
Yes, India has always had a defensive mindset. It is changing. It's changing slowly. And I think Indian foreign policy is much more deliberative. So it is changing. We hope that it will change completely for the good, and they should use Taiwan as well. They don't have anything to be beholden to China, and China has never been reliable, especially this communist China. So they don't have anything to really feel obliged towards China. That I agree with. So I think we are already over our time, and I request all my viewers that please ask your questions if you haven't already asked, because now we are going to move into question rounds. Also, I request you to please like, share, and subscribe this video. And also, if you may please contribute something to us so that we can keep giving you this great content. This is not what I am saying. This is what the viewers have been telling me. So I just repeated it to you. So let's move over to the question round, Sree. I haven't seen many questions come up so far. So you can take your time answering them. So let's have the first question on the screen, please. The questions will be flashed on the screen. You can have a look and I'll read them out as well. Reena Sukhdev, and calling out the left rigmarole, why are US Indians not as involved in straight talk? Why are they crumbling to left? Oh, good question.
I won't say that they are crumbling to left. See, this is the playbook that is being used is the same, whether you take India or United Kingdom or the United States. It's almost always the same set of players. In the United States, it's under the guise of CAIR, Council for American Islamic Relations. And they are a well-organized lot. And they have come about, and this resolution was their handiwork. And if you look at the city resolutions that have been passed, the wording in the resolution is near identical. And why is that? Because they looked at it, probably the city councils looked at it. I'm getting paid for this. This does not affect my city. It doesn't affect my country. What's the harm in passing it? Right. So this is the kind of mindset with which these city councils are providing. And I think it's a shame on them because they still have to spend time, which is taxpayers' money, to vote on it. And in many cities, what we have observed is the contrarian viewpoint. They're not allowing them to express that at all. There is no way that the Indian Americans can go back and say, look, this is what the truth is, that you should look at this also before you vote. In fact, the few times that Indian Americans got a chance to explain it, the city council members nodded their head vigorously after hours of explanations and convincing, only to go back and vote the next day along the lines of everybody else. I mean, it's pure money game. Just do the math. 52 city councils, $156 million, 3 million per city council, 5 or 6 council members, $500,000 war chest. What's not to like about it? They don't have, see, because everywhere people are trying to raise funding for the next
bribery.
Pure bribery. Yes. So this is the problem that Indian Americans are faced with. Indian Americans are now grouping together. In fact, P-Gurus is one platform where what I did, I brought a lawmaker, Meenakshi Lekhi, to explain what went behind the CAA law. I brought in a governor, Tathagat Roy. Then I brought in the additional Solicitor General of India, Sri Venkatraman, who explained the complete legal basis for why CAA was passed. He touched upon every issue, not just the 3 countries of Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, but also why not to Sri Lanka and everything else. So at least if somebody is interested in knowing the truth, they can go to P-Guru's website and they can get the data from there. So at least some of us are, constantly at it, trying to make sure that, the truth comes out there. And we are also looking for people who are making this off-the-cuff remarks. Like Bernie Sanders found to his dislike that, he went to ICNA, which is Islamic Council for North America, and made a statement on Kashmir. It boomeranged on him. In fact, Biden won, in my opinion, mainly because he was the only one in that panel of presidential hopefuls who did not say anything about India or CAA or Article 370. He kept quiet. Now, again, he has started making noises. Then he corrects himself. He goes back and says, no, India is dear to me, near to me, and all that. So this is what you said. Democrats are not really clear in their messaging. They need to sharpen that messaging. I'm hoping that Kamala Harris's entry is going to help Biden to do that sharpening of messaging. By the way, Indian viewers, don't look at politics in a prism of black or white. It never is that way. It's always shades of gray. And when I said that, I like the fact that Kamala Harris is going to be a vice presidential candidate, I got a lot of grief. I said, what's not to like about somebody who has had a similar upbringing as you and I, possibly becoming the leader of the most powerful nation on earth? Possibly. I mean, she may not become, if she becomes vice president now, the path is being paid for her to become a president sometime in the near future, and she has age on her side. So there is all these things that need to be taken into account. My guess is that as far as India is concerned, there is not going to be much of a difference whether it's a Republican president in 2020 or a Democratic president. It is those two, like you said, Republican Democrats and Democratic Republicans, that frame the policy, and the policies are firmly in the direction of India. I also wanted to mention a little bit about the Israel Uae Act. That's going to be a big game changer. We're already seeing that all the what I call as questionable money that used to be funneled to India, that used to be based out of Dubai, is now finding its way to Turkey.
Okay.
You have to look at Mr. Amir Khan's trip in that filter, and
Okay. Okay, that's interesting. I think I need to do an episode on Amir Khan's visit to Turkey.
Yes.
Okay.
So I hope I answered that question. Yes, there is much more involvement. Yes, the Indian Americans are fighting back. There's lots of interesting things going on, and you just stay tuned. It is going to, come out in the right way.
Okay. Yes, and let me say, with the approval of Mr. Sree Iyer, that we will be meeting on this topic a few times more in future
Absolutely.
elections.
Yeah.
Yes. And the next question, Nishikant Sharma. Shriji, namaskar. There has been a continuity in US-India relationship for adequately long period now. Does it really matter for India who wins US elections? What is wrong if Biden? I think you just answered this question.
Yes, I did. Yeah. In fact, a lot of the viewers may not know this, but prior to India getting its independence, America was all for having a single entity. They were really pressuring British to not split India into two. You have to read The Shadow of a Great Game by Narinder Singh Sarila. I've mentioned this in many hangouts and P-Gurus, and I'm going to say that again here. He was the last aide-de-camp to Lord Mountbatten, and his diary is fascinating. It's just a few 100 pages, 120 pages. Every page is a revelation. But the United States tried its hardest to keep India united. It was British interests. They were controlling the oil in Middle East at that time, and they wanted to make sure that Russia would not be able to get access to that, and they needed a buffer state, and that's why Pakistan was formed. Pakistan was not Jinnah's idea. Pakistan was a British idea. Please understand this. And if you want proof, read that book.
Okay, that's great. So we will take the title and the publisher from you, and we'll put it in the comment section.
Yeah.
Anu Lakshman, would Susan Rice as Biden's VP candidate have made a difference?
I don't think so. See, Kamala Harris has proved herself. This is her second term in Senate or the first term in Senate. She has proved herself as a very capable person. You have to look at all the Senate hearings that took place when, the Russian interference in 2016 was being debated, where, lawmaker or White House officials who were involved in the campaign of President Trump, they were all hauled over the coals in the Senate. The way she questioned them, the way she reacted, because first question is in your control. Beyond that, you have to ask based on what the answers are. So she was very effective in that. And she has always been seen as an underdog. Don't get me wrong. Even when she was running for the city of San Francisco as the attorney general for I think it's called a city attorney or something like that, the top attorney post. That also was not easy for her. She had to fight her way to win that. Then from there to become the state attorney general, there was another big fight. And from there to become the senator. So she has always been beset with huge challenges that you cannot do this thing. It is beyond your league. And she has proved all her detractors wrong. It is my opinion that Kamala Harris is very balanced and that it will not be an anti-India or a pro-India look. It will be a very balanced look. And I don't think I want anybody to kind of lean something towards one direction or the other just because they happen to be of that country. You are an American first. I mean, as a lawmaker, America and American interests come first. And I think Kamala Harris is perhaps a better choice than Susan Rice, because Susan Rice's experience was as the UN representative for the United States. United Nations as a body has lost a lot of relevance. So I think that might have come into, in the weighing of who is more a worthy candidate. And I think Kamala Harris has much more to offer to the presidency than perhaps Susan Rice. This is my personal opinion.
Okay, yes, of course. Padmakar Pandey, how do you see the semiconductor biz getting affected between India, US, and China? How can India benefit in this biz? Can we have semiconductor factories in India?
That's a great question. If you will permit me 2 minutes, I'll take to explain how the semiconductor fabs have grown.
Please.
So in the 60s and 70s, all the semiconductor business, even I think into the 80s, the semiconductor business was completely located in either Europe or in the United States. Intel had its own fab, IBM had its own fab, Texas Instruments had its own fab. Everybody had their own fabric. So what changed after that? Taiwan came up as a viable fab maker because what they could do was, running a fab is like having a white elephant. If a company had a fab, then they had to keep finding products to, make use of the fab. It's like you have an elephant, white elephant. It's consumed. And if you don't have a product to make, then you are going to idle the fab. You cannot turn it off. It has to keep running. So that is what prompted people to say, well, I would like to move away from the fab business and see if somebody else would take it up. When Taiwan became the leader of the semiconductor fabs, what they could then do was they could use their line to support multiple companies all at once. So what that did also was many chip companies could afford to get into the startup business. Cirrus Logic, NVIDIA today, and so on, and Qualcomm. All these people, they don't need anymore their own fab investment to do it. They can go and get their chip fabricated in Taiwan. Now, when China opened its doors in the late 90s, early 2000s, what China did was it encouraged everybody from Taiwan to come and set up shop. So like what I said, that industries got dismantled brick by brick from America and got sent out to China. The same thing as far as fab is concerned happened from Taiwan to China. That's how you have semiconductor fabs in China. Now, Taiwan has a very robust intellectual property law. Taiwan doesn't steal somebody's chip or put additional logic on that will come back and then start snooping on what you're doing and then reporting back to home. That's what China has been accused of doing. If you fab something into Chinese fab, they say that China adds additional logic onto your chip, and then whenever you are not looking, that data will, some data about what you're doing finds its way back to China.
I couldn't quite hear you. Could you please repeat what you said?
Sorry about that. So this kind of stuff was accused. That China was accused of that, and there has been some proof to say that things that are getting manufactured in China, they had like Wi-Fi chips that would connect to, say, Amazon server or Apple server. They had these small Wi-Fi chips on the server blades, and these will come alive, and they would dump the entire operating system and the Linux operating system that was running on the server back to China. This has been proven. So there's no. So this is the problem. Chinese fabs have a reliability problem in terms of credibility. Now, can India make its own fabs? So India came close to allowing Intel to build its own fab in India. There was only one problem. Intel said that we cannot rely on the city supply. We need to have our own electricity plant. They needed to have gobs of water, a lot of water, and they wanted to be able to have their own electricity plant. Suddenly, all the communists, because this was UPA government period, they all said, "Oh, that is like East India Company all over again. Intel wants to come and set up shop here, but they want to have their own electric plant." So that Intel gave up its plan to do it in India, and instead that fab went to Vietnam. Now Intel is producing the chips in Vietnam. That would have been a huge game changer, because semiconductor fab is such a huge industry. It's got so many different things that it needs from various small vendors, that the ecosystem would have really flourished, especially because India has the engineering talent to do some of these things at the most effective price points. So today in the United States, there's only one company that is having its own fab, and that is Intel. And even Intel is kind of looking around, so do I want to keep the fab or not? So that is a situation of semiconductor fabs. If India wants to get into the semiconductor fab, they had one called Semiconductor Complex that actually got burnt down in fire. It was based in Chandigarh, I think 1980s or so. And after that, India never tried doing it again. And in semiconductor things, very expensive technology.
Okay. Let's move on to the next question. I think that was a fairly long answer. So Democrats promote Islamists like Ilhan Omar, but they insult and ignore brilliant Tulsi Gabbard. People of Indian origin should never vote Democrats.
I think it's a good question. What went wrong with Tulsi Gabbard? For some reason, she had some personal equations problem with Hillary Clinton. And she was the deputy chair in 2016. Her star was on the rise. She was the deputy chair of the DNC. And for some inexplicable reason, she was kept out, and she was actually not even attending the DNC in 2016. And after that, she has been shunned. So there is a Hillary, quote unquote, Hillary camp that runs Democratic Party. And there are the others also, but they say that this is the primary organ that controls a lot of the thing. And that's what led to Tulsi Gabbard's political demise. In terms of her being Hindu, I don't think that was the reason. There was some other thing. I mean, Tulsi was also her own person. She would not, she would not just like that toe the line of everybody else. So there is something more there than meets the eye. That was the reason why she got shunned by the Democrats. In fact, now she's not even contesting for the House from Hawaii. And that means that she will be just somebody outside. So she'll have to figure out in a Biden dispensation if she's going to be a secretary of something or something. We don't know. I don't know what her relations are vis-a-vis Biden and Kamala Harris. It is possible that she might find some rehabilitation in the new White House if that is a Democratic run one. In that case, she'll be back as a true blue Democrat. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay, next question. Upinder Velor. Both Democrats and Republicans are indifferent to legal immigrants. S386. You are suggesting Indian Americans to vote as a bloc, but with which party?
Well, this is a very good question. The S386 got stopped by a person called, I think, Dick Durbin, Illinois senator. And see, people are not taking positions on all these bills based on whether it is right or wrong. What they are taking positions on are who is paying them more to take a certain position. So, as much as we say that Indian politics have degraded, I can't tell you enough about US politics. It's come down to the same level, and that's what really determines policy one way or the other. In fact, H1s have been completely stopped by Trump now, temporarily for the corona problem. But I have a feeling that H1s will not come back. But in my opinion, that's a good thing for India, because what happens is the work that would have been done by the H1 engineers in the United States will actually come to India, and you will have more people getting better jobs in India to do the same work. It's just that they will not be able to take foreign trips. Don't get hung up about this foreign trips. Not after this coronavirus thing. You don't know what to touch. You don't know which air to breathe. You're better off knowing where you are. If you're a comfortable lifestyle, that's where you need to be.
Great. That's a great response. Okay, now last question coming up for the day. Bharat Ved Prakash. Kudos to both of you for doing such a remarkable job. Jaipur Dialogues and P Gurus are my favorite channels. So it's not really a question, it is a commendation. So we can just say thank you.
Thank you.
And close today's session. Thank you very much, Sree Iyer. It's been wonderful having you on Jaipur Dialogues for the first time. And I hope this is just the first visit of the many more to come. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, Sanjay. And I look forward to being on your show again. And all the best to you. You're doing a great job. Jaipur Dialogues gives a platform to express somebody's thoughts and finish that thought rather than just get a 2-second, 20-second, 30-second soundbite. You can develop the thought and explain why. And I had a lot of fun being on your channel today, and I look forward to being back there. Namaskar, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Sree. Thank you so much. Good night from here and good day to you.